So there's this ancient story from India, one of the seminal pieces of Hindu literature. It's one of the oldest stories in the world. It's called the Mahabharata, or the Mahabharata, if you're American. And it's a long story. Like, if you translate it into English and print it in normal books, the books would be like 12 volumes on a shelf. It would like fill this whole shelf. Mostly they get abridged versions. You can get a copy in like a thick volume. Fantastic story. It's a story of Maha, great, and Bharat is the name for India in Sanskrit. So it's the great story of the people and the history of India. It's in its mythology. In fact, this story is how Ganesh lost his tusk. Why Ganesh is called Ekadanta, one-toothed one, because the sage Vyasa, who was dictating this story in poem form, was holding forth. It was coming through from the inner self, from the divine Shakti. He was in the zone and channeling this poem story in rhyming poetry. Can you imagine? And spontaneously. And it just flew out of his mouth. And Lord Ganesh came down from heaven and copied everything down that Vyasa was saying. Wrote it with a quill and ink. And somewhere along the line, his quill broke, and without missing a beat, he snapped off one of his tusks, dipped it in the ink, and kept writing. Because it was more important that the sage's state and process went on uninterrupted. That divine voice that comes through your faculties purely from the inner self is a rare and precious thing. And so the smart ones, when that happens, they know to support the flow. Rappers experience some of this. Improvisationalists experience this. You get in a flow. A door opens somewhere close to your intuition and your imagination. That door opens and the words come. You use your skills, and your training all supports the instrument that is your mind and your faculties to do that. But there come these times when there's this spark, and it sparks this flow, and you're right there in it, and it comes through you. I have had, thank you, some moments like that, and I've always felt that I was just lucky to be there, that someone was doing something, and the story itself came through and wanted to be told, and I got lucky to be the person out of whose mouth it sprang. So that's how this story happened, this Mahabharata. And I want to tell you two little pieces of it. There's a king in it. His name is Yudhisthira. And the whole story is about the kings before him, his ancestors, and how they became kings and how they married and how they had children. And it's an interesting and tortipated story like any human story. And Yudhisthira had four brothers. There were five of them. They're called the Pandavas, the Pandava brothers. And their father was a king and their mother was a queen. And she had this mantra. And this mantra, the sacred mantra that she could utter. And when she would utter it, one of the gods would come down from heaven and impregnate her. You see why I'm Hindu now. And so she did this 5 times because she couldn't have sex with her husband. Her husband was under a curse that if he ever made love to his wives, he would die. So he was like, well, I'm a king and I've got to have an heir. Honey, you've got this mantra. You have to use it. And she was like, oh, I really don't want to be porked by the gods. And I did it once with the sun god, and I had to give the child away because I was like 15 or 13 when I did it. It was awful. And the king's like, okay, snuff out my family line. I won't have an heir. And she's like, okay, I love you. I will do it for you. And the first one that comes down to impregnate her is Lord Dharma. Dharma is right action, doing the right thing at the right time in the right place, doing the thing you were built to do, that you're born to do, that's your sort of place in life, your duty in life. It can be interpreted in many different ways, like the sun's dharma is to shine. The moon's dharma is to revolve around the earth and to show the light of the sun off of its silvery surface. My dharma is to be a nun serving the gay community, to support people with information about safe sex and HIV, to raise money to help people who don't have funds and need help, to give voice to those who don't have a voice. That's my dharma as a nun. And to be silly. My dharma is absolutely to be silly. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Accomplishing my dharma. Flying pig. Pig anus. So Lord Dharma porks this woman. Her name is Kunti. The queen, his name is Kunti, and she has a child, and that child is Yudhishthira. And Yudhishtira is gifted with perfect understanding of dharma. Yudhishtira is the most righteous person on the earth. He understands complex questions of duty, dharma, right, wrong, morality, appropriateness. The next one she has is, I hope I get the order right. I think the next one who comes down is the god of the wind, Vayu, and she gives birth to Bhima, who is huge and strong, because the wind, hurricanes are pretty, tornadoes, look how strong they are. So he's the strongest person on the earth. And the next one she calls down is Indra, the king of heaven, and gives birth to Arjuna, who is the greatest warrior, the greatest armed fighter on the face of the earth. And the next one she calls down are the, I can't remember the name of the god, but they're the divine twins, these twin gods that are just, the Ashwin twins. And they're just beautiful, beautiful gods, identical twins. And she gives birth to twins, Sakula and Nahadeva. And those are the Pandavas. Now, in this story, they're going to be cheated many, many times by their cousins, the Kauravas. And they are, oh, sorry, jiggled the camera. They're 101 of the Kaurava brothers. And they were born because their mother and father, also a king and a queen, she gave birth to, she was pregnant for like a long time, like years or a year or some long time. And she gave birth to this big black tarry ball. And she was like, that's a bad omen. And one of the sages in their court was like, cut the ball into pieces, into 101 pieces, and put them all in clay jars, and they'll gestate. And she did, and they did, and they became these brothers, the Kauravas. Go figure. The chief among the Kauravas, son number 1, was named Duryodhana. And Duryodhana is sort of the Sith, sort of the bad guy of the story of the Mahabharata. And he's going to be the chief prank player and evildoer and cheater of his cousins, the Pandavas. And there's going to be a huge, huge war because he's going to cheat them one too many times, and they're going to go to war. Now, you may have heard of the Hindu god Krishna. He's blue, he plays the flute, he's got a peacock feather on his crown. He is the incarnation of the god Vishnu, the supporter and protector of the universe. And Krishna is on the earth as this divine being, and he is a cousin to both of these sets of princes who are cousins themselves. He is cousin to the Pandavas and to the Kauravas. So this is the part I wanted to tell you about this story. First part. The Kauravas trick, Duryodhana tricks the Pandavas, and in the trick, they are forced into exile. They make a bad deal, and they have to go and live in the forest for like 13 years. And while they're wandering in their exile, they come upon this lake, and they've been wandering across the desert for days, and they are parched. And one by one, the 5 brothers run up to the lake and drink, and drop dead. Right before they drink, there's this voice that booms out over the lake that says, "Do not drink this water. It is not yours." And they're like, "I'm sure you will understand. I've been crossing the desert. I'm absolutely famished, thirsty, parched." And they drink and they drop dead. Now you'd think like the 3rd and 4th one would like go up to the lake and be like, "Oh, look, my other brothers are dead. Maybe I shouldn't drink." But no, All except Yudhisthira. He's the last one. He comes up to the lake and he's like, who has killed my brothers? And this voice says, I told them not to. They drank from the lake. They disobeyed dharma. And Yudhisthira says, oh, I am so sorry. I apologize on my brother's behalf. Had I been here, I would have counseled them in the correct dharma. Is there anything I can do, O voice, to bring them back to life? Is there any way I can serve you that will bring my brothers back to life? And the voice says, so be it. Answer my questions. And the voice asks him like 16 or so, like very sophisticated questions about morality, dharma, and right action. If you were in a train leaving Chicago, going east at 60 miles an hour, and your best friend is in a train leaving New York and traveling west at 50 miles an hour, where are you going to get together and have hamburgers and party? And Yudhisthira answers each question. And the last question is the one I want to tell you about. The last question is, the voice, booming out, asks Yudhisthira, you have answered all my questions perfectly. Answer me this one. What is inevitable? What is inevitable? And Yudhisthira, with perfect understanding, answers correctly, happiness. And his brothers spring back to life. And it is at that point that the voice reveals itself and says to Yudhisthira, I am your father. I am Lord Dharma. And I knew you would come and play this game with me. And I wanted to see and experience your perfect understanding. And please know that though I am an invisible God, I am always watching you, and I am very proud of you. That's what Dharma, the God, the incarnation of right action, of the duty of all the pieces of the world working together to be the world, to be our universe. That is what this God said to Yudhisthira, who was so proud of him for answering what in life, what in the universe is inevitable, is going to happen. Happiness. Take that with you. Always look for the silver lining if you can. Look, like Mr. Rogers' mom said, look for the helpers. Remember that happiness is inevitable. This too shall pass. As bad as it is, look for the good. Make a practice out of it. Make a practice out of it. It's kind of like using your intuition to write a poem, but base it on what you can find looking around you in life. When I really stop to do this exercise, even in the worst things, even in things that have been the most anxiety-making, I've had to admit there have always been a great beneficial side to these things happening, as dreadful as they may have been. The next part of the story I want to tell you about is right at the climax. So this exile, right, happens, and the last day of the last year of the exile, they're not supposed to be found. They're supposed to be hidden and not found. And so, of course, the Kauravas are looking for them because they want them to go into exile again. If they get found, they didn't do their exile right, and they have to do 13 more years of exile. So one of the Kauravas, I'm sorry I'm not remembering the plot point perfectly. I'd like to, if anyone writes grants, I'd like to get a grant to get enough money to produce videos and tell the story from start to finish in Sister Unity videos. So, it's like right at the stroke of midnight on the last day, the Kauravas find the Pandavas and are like, you're the Pandavas, we found you, now you have to go to 13 more years of exile. And the Pandavas are like, no, It's midnight. No, and so they disagree and they're arguing, and it's war, and it leads to war. And the whole time the Pandavas are like, please, let's not have this war. You are our cousins. Just give us our kingdom back. We will forgive all the shit you pulled. Just give us our kingdom back. We'll be fine. And Duryodhana, who is like the king of kings, like all the other kings in Bharat, honor him and recognize his power, and he's the king of kings. And Duryodhana is like, I'm not giving this up. You're not getting your kingdom back. Are you kidding me? Screw you. You did it wrong. You can't have it. You're not getting it. And Yudhisthira says, like, they're about to go to war, right? Like, they're massing their armies. It's looking grave. Now, Arjuna, the perfect warrior, one of the Pandavas, he goes with Duryodhana to see Krishna. They're both going to go and try to get Krishna to bring his army, because he's king of the city of Ayodhya. And they're going to, Krishna, come and fight on our side. You're our cousin. So they both show up at Krishna's palace at the same time. And Krishna meets them, both of them. And he says, okay, here's the deal. I love you both. Here's the deal. One of you can have my entire army. My archers, my elephants, my infantry, my chariots, my bubblegum makers. You can have all of them. The other one can have me. No weapons, just me. And Arjuna, they draw straws or something, and Arjuna gets to pick first. And Arjuna says, there's no choice. This is not even a choice. Of course, I choose you, Krishna. You are Krishna. And Duryodhana is like, you're a freaking idiot! It's got like thousands of warriors and elephants, and they're mine! You, my cousin, are going down! This is going to be good. And Krishna's like, you got him. You take them. They're all yours, Duryodhana. Duryodhana goes skipping off, and Krishna turns to Arjuna and he says, you chose right. You chose wisely. So this war is going to happen, right? And Yudhishthira is like, okay, one last time before we go to war, before I have to slaughter all my cousins, because on my cousin's side is our grandfather, Bhishma. The man who taught us how to fight is over there, and I have to fight him. All of my, like, the courtiers that I grew up around, they're all fighting over there. Now, half of them were smart and they left and they're with us, so this is just going to be like the entire world into two factions killing each other. It's awful. We have to stop this. So he arranges a meeting with Duryodhana, and Krishna goes with him. And he meets with Duryodhana. He says, Duryodhana, I will bow down to you and recognize you as the king of kings if you will just give me and my brothers just our one little kingdom. Just give us this one, you take everything else. Duryodhana says, I'm not giving you shit. I loathe you. I'm not giving you anything. And Yudhisthira says, we cannot have this kind of slaughter. This war is horrible. Just give us the capital city of our kingdom. You can take the entire rest of the kingdom. Just give us the one city to live in and govern, and we'll call it even. Duryodhana says, I am not giving you shit. And Yudhishthira says, cousin, just give us one palace in that capital city to live in with our wife. The five of them have one wife together. It's a long story. And we will call it even. Just one palace to live in. And Duryodhana says, I wouldn't even give you a broom closet in a shack. You get nothing. And Yudhisthira yells at him and he says, you are causing death and you are destroying the structure of our society. All of these good people will be injured or dead, and this misery that this will cause will last for generations, and it's because of you and your selfishness. And Duryodhana mocks Yudhishthira. And he says, "Ooh, Mr. I'm right action, Mr. I know everything and how to do everything right and appropriate, just blew his cool and got all feisty at me. You mad, bro?" And Krishna stops Duryodhana and says, "No, you do not understand. When a righteous man is angry, with righteous anger, there is nothing in the world that can stand in the way of that anger. Beware." When the righteous man gets angry, loses it, nothing can stand in the way of the force of that righteous anger. It reminds me of ACT UP and Queer Nation. There are times when you have to use your anger to make people take notice of your life, of your integrity, of your rights, of your heart. Sometimes it is perfectly appropriate to practice ahimsa, non-violence, to be sweet like Saraswati, to be quiet and still like Shiva in meditation, to be good like Krishna. And there are other times when it has become appropriate to be Durga, to be Kali, and to stand up and to use your righteous anger in defense or to attack evil, wrong, to protect people who need protection. The key is understanding what's going on and making sure that your anger is righteous. I'm not saying that all anger is dandy. I'm saying if you've really contemplated the truth of what's going on and you know something isn't right, your anger can be applied with focus and skill to correct what is going wrong. Those things that we think are imperfections. The world is filled with so much mud, so much shit, so many flaws. But lotuses grow out of mud, and shit is used to grow tomatoes. I love tomatoes. So when you are thinking of your own imperfections, look for the ways in which those have benefited you. Look for the ways in which some behavior that you wish you didn't have was chosen, consciously or unconsciously, maybe when you were younger and picked up the habit, for a reason that served you then. Maybe you can find out what that reason was and make a choice about whether it still serves you or not. But you don't have to get down on yourself for the things that you want to correct. Everything had its time and place, and you are basically good, and happiness is inevitable. Things that we might consider imperfections are actually beneficial if you know how to look at them. And when you do, you may find that something that you had thought was upsetting is actually okay, and that leads to happiness.